Cumulus Media is a giant in the radio industry, and it has carried Rush Limbaugh and Sean Hannity's talk show on stations for years. So when Politico reported this week that the network was considering dropping both hosts, the media took note.
We're back with news from inside the right-wing talk radio bubble.
Two of the most powerful voices in conservative talk radio may go off the air in many radio markets very soon.
Cumulus Media, the second biggest broadcaster in the country, is planning to drop Rush Limbaugh and Sean Hannity from its stations by the end of the year.
Cumulus isn't commenting on the reports. In fact, no one is. But it still has fueled the debate about whether conservative talk radio, and particularly Rush Limbaugh, are losing the edge. Joining me from Seattle, syndicated radio host Michael Medved. Here in Washington, syndicated radio host Thom Hartmann. And in Hartford, Connecticut, Michael Harrison, founder and editor of Talkers Magazine, which dubs itself the Bible of talk radio and new talk media. I like that. Michael Harrison, let's go straight to you. There are two ways to look at this. One of this is that, in fact, this is a big blow to conservative media if, in fact, Rush and Sean get dropped. The other way to look at this is that this is simply people sorting out their negotiations in public, and this is simply two people trying to resolve a deal, and in fact, we can't read that much more into it. What is your take from what you're hearing about what exactly this whole debate means?
It's clearly a radio deal. It has nothing to do with the future of conservative talk radio. It has nothing to do with the future of Rush Limbaugh or Sean Hannity. It just is a deal between two giant radio companies trying to negotiate whether they're going to continue to be in business together. Politics makes strange bedfellows in radio, and they're two competing companies that also work together, Clear Channel and Cumulus. And they're just trying to come up with a deal. And all of this public proclamations about Rush Limbaugh's ratings are down, or the conservative movement is drying up, and all that, that's the politicization of this situation. In fact, it's just a deal. They're not going to be dropped from the air. If they don't come up with a deal with Cumulus, they'll be on Clear Channel stations or any other companies that would love to have the two biggest attractions in talk radio, Rush Limbaugh and Sean Hannity.
Well, Thom Hartmann, let's go to you. Do you agree? I mean, David Brock from Media Matters said on MSNBC that this is a huge victory for progressive radio. You're in progressive radio. When you look at this, do you view the fact that they might get dropped by these 40 Cumulus stations as a victory for progressive radio?
No, I agree with Michael that it is just a business deal. And in fact, I'd take it a step further. It is the further vertical integration of the radio industry. Clear Channel owns Premiere, the syndicating company that runs Rush and Sean's shows. And so they're moving that onto their stations. Cumulus has their own syndication company. They bought the old ABC radio networks. And so they want to move their own talent on. Because if you own the talent that you have on your local radio shows, then you get to capture the network minutes, advertising revenue, as well as the local
So then why
revenue.
does David Brock say that this is a victory for progressive? Is that for progressive radio? Is that just wishful thinking?
David Brock and Media Matters were leading the Boycott Limbaugh crusade, and which did presumably some damage to Limbaugh's show. I can tell you it did a lot of damage to progressive talk radio because a lot of advertisers right across the board said, just pull me out of all talk radio. So I don't know Limbaugh's numbers, but I do know on our side of it that progressive talk radio took a hit as a consequence of that.
Michael Medved, let's go to you. I'm curious to get your take on whether or not, if Cumulus drops them or not, or how this gets resolved. Who stands to lose more on this, Cumulus or Clear Channel?
I have absolutely no idea. I think both companies will be fine. They're huge, successful companies. And I've got to agree here with Thom Hartmann. The trouble that I have with this entire logic that David Brock was expressing is it's not a victory for anybody if all of a sudden you have less political conversation. I want my friend Thom Hartmann's show to be successful. We disagree on everything, but I think it's great when people are listening to progressive talk radio. I think it's great when people are listening to conservative talk radio. And one thing I can absolutely assure you, as sure as I'm sitting here, in every single major market, whether they do this deal between Cumulus and Clear Channel or not, Rush and Sean will be on the air. They will be on the air because they have very devoted listeners and because they fulfill a public need and because they're popular.
Right. I mean, we should note that even if they do get dropped by these 40 stations, you're right, they are still massively successful and lucrative. Michael Harrison, quickly to you. We are now more than a year since the sort of famous Sandra Fluke incident and Rush Limbaugh, and there's been a lot of talk and a lot of reporting, some true, some spin, about how many advertisers are boycotting or did boycott Rush Limbaugh's program. More than a year out from that incident, what do you know about what kind of effect that incident had on Rush Limbaugh's show?
It hurt all of talk radio because it made sponsors wary of being in anything controversial. But there has been almost a complete recovery, and the future is very bright. And it's very dangerous when politics gets into the business of communications. We've politicized this open marketplace of ideas in the capitalistic system, and it's very dangerous. Everything is going to be fine. I assure you, we're going to get past this period.
I want to quickly go to what Rush Limbaugh...
I could just...
1 second. I want to go quickly to what Rush Limbaugh has actually said about this. We're going to play a clip. Here's what he said on his radio show on Monday.
Nothing is going to change. You are going to be able to get this radio program on as many, if not more, radio stations down the road than it's on now. And what you're being treated to is just a public business negotiation.
Tom Hartman, let me get your take on it. I mean, there is this idea that at some point Rush Limbaugh will retire, and there is some research to indicate that his audience might be getting a bit older. Where do you see Rush Limbaugh, his audience, his success, his popularity in, say, 3 to 5 years from now?
Well, I think that's up to Rush. He's a brilliant and talented guy. He does radio really, really well.
Are the trend lines going up for him, or are they going down?
I don't know. I'm not inside, but I do know that in general, talk radio is doing well, particularly as we move on to other platforms. You know, onto the web, into TV simulcast. It is helping right across the board. So I'm guessing if he sticks around, he's going to do well, and if he doesn't, there's a farm team. You know, there are people ready to step in.
Michael Harrison, what do you think about sort of the future and the trend lines on Rush Limbaugh's audience?
I think Rush is going to be around as long as he wants to. He'll be 90 years old and still have a show. He's a brilliant broadcaster. The point I think we have to take out of this is that when people detract talk radio, take a look where it's coming from. It's usually coming from political circles. They try to detract the success level of the hosts with whom they disagree politically.
You know, Michael Medved, I'm going to go to you on this, but anybody feel free to chime in on it. I mean, talk a little bit about the role of these advertiser boycotts lately. I mean, the internet has made it incredibly easy to galvanize a lot of people to protest, to boycott, to go after sponsors who do sponsor some of these programs. I mean, this is a lot more easier to get 100,000 signatures than it was, say, 20, 30 years ago. What role has that had? I mean, you see a lot of people now apologizing out of fear, I think, for losing some of these sponsors. Talk about the role that the internet has had in galvanizing some of these boycotts.
Actually, I think all of the boycotts are a ridiculous idea. I've always been opposed to right-wing boycotts. I've always been opposed to left-wing boycotts. It is a good thing if advertisers advertise shows that allow people to engage in political talk. And my message to the David Brocks of this world and people who are part of this Flush Rush campaign is if you really do want a victory for progressive talk radio, then organize people to tune in to Tom Hartman. Organize people to tune in to Al Sharpton on MSNBC if that's what you care about. But you see, this is a basic point of freedom of speech, is if you don't like what somebody else is saying, then say something different and get people to pay attention to it. This impulse that people have to shut somebody down because you don't like what they're saying, I think is, and I use the term very advisedly, it's un-American and it's inappropriate and it stinks. And by the way, it's also wildly ineffective. Look at the numbers for Rush and Sean.
All right, quickly, before we go, one-word answers. Tom Hartman, will they resolve this?
Yes.
Michael Medved?
Will
Cumulus drop Rush and Sean?
Probably not.
Michael Harrison,
maybe
what's
on
your
one
take?
or two stations.
What do you say, Michael Harrison?
Maybe.
All right, we covered the gamut there. Tom Hartman, Michael Harrison, Michael Medved, thank you all for joining us.